Confucius' life-changing quotes that inspire Stoic living every day. What if I told you that the secret to navigating the chaos of modern life isn't buried in self-help books or hidden in ancient Greek philosophy, but instead comes from a Chinese sage who lived over 2.500 years ago? Confucius, a name often spoken with reverence, was not just a thinker of his time but a guide for ours. His wisdom doesn't belong in dusty scrolls. It lives in our struggles, decisions, and moments of doubt. Today, we're going to dive into his most transformative quotes and discover how they seamlessly align with the Stoic ideals of resilience, discipline, and peace. Close your eyes for a moment and think. How often do we feel tossed around by the waves of life? Criticism from others, unpredictable setbacks, and the gnawing pressure to be better can make us feel like a storm is raging inside. But what if we could find a calm center, a stillness that no external chaos could shake? Confucius once said, "It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop." Imagine the weight these words carry. They echo the Stoic virtue of endurance. Progress, however small, is still progress. Life isn't a sprint. It's a marathon where every step forward matters. Yet how often do we let fear of failure or impatience push us into abandoning what truly matters? Let's anchor this wisdom with a story, a modern professional. Let's call her Mia, who was on the brink of collapse. She worked tirelessly, seeking validation in a high-stakes corporate job. But every promotion brought more anxiety, not fulfillment. One day, her mentor gave her this quote from Confucius. It wasn't the answer to her problems, but it was a reminder to embrace steady progress. She started focusing on consistent, small improvements instead of chasing unattainable perfection. Over time, she found clarity, resilience, and a sense of purpose. Confucius' philosophy ties into Stoicism in an incredible way, especially in how both emphasize discipline over chaos. Confucius believed, when we see men of a contrary character, we should turn inwards and examine ourselves. This is the cornerstone of self-awareness. It aligns beautifully with the Stoic practice of examining one's own thoughts and actions. Now pause for a second and ask yourself, when was the last time you turned inward instead of lashing outward in frustration? It's easy to blame the world when things go wrong, but how often are our struggles reflections of our own choices? One of my favorite stories involves a man named Peter, a young entrepreneur. Peter faced constant rejection while trying to launch his business. Instead of complaining about bad luck or people not understanding his vision, he turned inward. He asked himself, am I clear in my messaging? Am I communicating my value effectively? This mindset shift, inspired by Confucius' teaching, was what finally helped him secure his first investors. The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones. Confucius reminds us that monumental change happens incrementally. This aligns with the Stoic practice of embracing the present moment while working towards long-term goals. But here's the challenge. Are you willing to carry those small stones? Or are you fixated on the daunting size of the mountain? Let's picture ancient Confucius walking through a crowded market, observing people lost in their daily busyness, their heads full of worry. I can't help but wonder, would he see much difference if he walked into a busy office today? Confucius' advice would likely be the same. Focus on what's within your control. Let go of what isn't. This brings us to the next quote. Life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated. Think about it. How much complexity in our lives comes from our refusal to let go of things beyond our control? This is where Confucius and Stoicism intersect profoundly. The Stoics remind us to focus on the dichotomy of control, what we can change versus what we can't. Confucius offers us a poetic yet practical version of the same truth. You don't need to fix the world. You only need to master yourself. In modern times, one might say, but life is complicated. Deadlines loom, relationships strain, and unexpected hardships arise. Yet, have you ever considered this question? How much of our suffering is created not by reality, but by our reaction to it? Confucius teaches us that clarity comes when we strip away unnecessary layers. When you look at the storm of emotions, obligations, and desires that swirl within you, can you distinguish between the wind you must endure and the sails you can control? One last thought before we continue. Real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. In a world saturated with information, this Confucian insight might be the most stoic one of all. We often pride ourselves on being knowledgeable, but do we take the time to recognize what we don't know? The humility to admit ignorance is the foundation of wisdom. How often do you find yourself pretending to know something, simply to avoid embarrassment or vulnerability? Confucius teaches us that admitting ignorance isn't a weakness, it's strength. It's the beginning of learning and growth. So, as we close this chapter, let's pause for reflection. Which of these lessons resonates most with your life right now? And more importantly, how will you begin to apply it today? Will you carry small stones, examine yourself instead of others, or simplify your life by focusing only on what truly matters? The paradox of strength and surrender. How Confucius wisdom transforms modern chaos into inner peace. Imagine standing in the eye of a hurricane. The winds around you howl with chaos, tearing apart everything in their path. Yet, in the very center, there is stillness, a calm untouched by the storm. This is the paradox that Confucius teaches us. True strength is not in resisting the storm, but in finding peace within it. And doesn't that sound a lot like Stoicism? Confucius once said, "He who learns but does not think is lost. He who thinks but does not learn is in great danger." At its heart, this quote reveals the balance between action and reflection. In our modern world, we often swing to extremes. Some of us act impulsively without stopping to think, while others overanalyze and fail to act. Where do you fall on this spectrum? Let's consider a modern parallel. Imagine an athlete training for a marathon. If they spend all their time running without reviewing their form or strategy, they risk injury. Conversely, if they only analyze race techniques without practicing, they'll never be ready for the event. Confucius' wisdom, much like Stoic teachings, urges us to find harmony between doing and thinking, between effort and mindfulness. Silence is a true friend who never betrays. This Confucian gem might seem out of place in our noisy, hyper-connected age, but think about the last time you were truly silent. No music, no notifications, no mental chatter. How did it feel? Was it peaceful? Or did it make you uneasy? We live in a culture that equates noise with progress. Yet, silence can be our most profound teacher. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, wrote in Meditations about finding solitude within oneself. For both Confucius and Marcus, silence wasn't about withdrawing from the world but connecting deeply with it. In silence, we can observe our thoughts without judgment, distinguish what matters from what doesn't, and recalibrate our minds to face life with clarity. Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. This quote epitomizes the resilience that Confucius and Stoicism both champion. Life will knock us down, this is inevitable, but what defines us is how we rise. Let's bring this to life with a story. Meet Alex, a man whose dream was to become a musician. For years, he faced rejection after rejection from record labels. Each no chipped away at his confidence until he almost gave up. Then, one day, he stumbled upon Confucius' words. It wasn't an instant transformation, but they sparked something in him. Slowly, he started focusing on what he could control: his craft, his practice, his persistence, and eventually, after countless setbacks, he succeeded. Now, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what's one area in your life where you've fallen? And more importantly, are you willing to rise again? Confucius also taught us, to see what is right and not do it is the want of courage. This speaks to the courage of integrity, a theme that resonates deeply with Stoicism. Knowing the right path is easy, walking it is hard. How often do we compromise our values for convenience or approval? Picture a corporate leader named Sarah who discovers unethical practices in her company. Speaking up could cost her career, yet staying silent would compromise her principles. Inspired by this Confucian wisdom, Sarah chooses to act. She faces backlash, but ultimately, her integrity inspires change within the company. This is the courage both Confucius and Stoicism demand, not fearlessness, but the bravery to do what is right despite fear. When anger rises, think of the consequences. This advice feels particularly urgent in our reactive age. We live in a world where anger spreads like wildfire on social media, in politics, even in our personal relationships. But Confucius teaches us to pause, to let anger cool before it consumes us. The Stoics echo this. Seneca warned that anger is brief madness. But here's the challenge. When was the last time you paused before reacting in anger? How often do you let it dictate your actions, only to regret it later? Take James, for example, a young manager who lost his temper during a team meeting. The outburst damaged relationships and morale. Reflecting on Confucius' words, James decided to change. He adopted a practice of counting to 10 whenever he felt anger rise, giving himself space to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. Over time, his team noticed the shift and began to respect his composure. Confucius also believed, the superior man is modest in his speech, but exceeds in his actions. This aligns seamlessly with the Stoic emphasis on action over words. In our era of performative gestures and superficial appearances, this lesson feels particularly relevant. Are you living a life that speaks for itself? Or are you caught up in appearances? Consider a modern-day hero, a doctor working tirelessly in a remote village, far from the spotlight. They don't post about their achievements or seek recognition, yet their quiet actions save lives and inspire change. This is the modesty Confucius describes, not shrinking away but letting actions speak louder than words. Finally, let's reflect on one of Confucius' most profound teachings. Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves. This reminds us of the futility of resentment and the harm it brings not just to others but to ourselves. Holding on to grudges is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. Confucius' wisdom here beautifully complements the Stoic idea of forgiveness as liberation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Forgiveness isn't about excusing bad behavior. It's about freeing yourself from the chains of anger and bitterness. So, as we reach the end of this part, let me ask you, what burden are you carrying that you need to let go of? And how will Confucius' wisdom guide you in the process? Timeless harmony. How Confucius and Stoicism unlock the secrets to a fulfilled life. Take a moment to reflect. What does fulfillment mean to you? Is it wealth, recognition, a sense of peace? Both Confucius and the Stoics would argue that fulfillment isn't found in what we possess, but in how we live. Their teachings illuminate a path not to a perfect life, but to one that is deeply aligned with virtue, clarity, and purpose. Confucius once observed, "The man who asks a question is a fool for a minute. The man who does not is a fool for life." This strikes at the heart of intellectual humility. How often do we let pride or fear stop us from seeking knowledge? How often do we trade understanding for the illusion of already knowing? This wisdom aligns seamlessly with Stoicism's emphasis on continuous learning. Epictetus, for example, advised that we should approach every day as students of life. So, here's a challenge. When was the last time you asked a question that truly made you vulnerable? Let's bring this idea into a modern context. Imagine Lisa, a seasoned professional who feels stuck in her career. She's afraid to ask for advice, thinking it would make her look incompetent. But one day, she takes a leap, approaching a mentor and asking the questions she's been too proud to voice. The insights she gains not only rejuvenate her career but transform her perspective. This is the power of asking, of embracing the temporary discomfort of not knowing. Confucius also taught, respect yourself and others will respect you. At first glance, this may seem like a call for confidence, but it goes much deeper. Respecting yourself means living in alignment with your values, staying true to your principles even when it's inconvenient or unpopular. It's about treating yourself with the same care and compassion that you would offer a dear friend. This teaching pairs beautifully with the Stoic practice of self-discipline. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about the importance of being true to oneself, regardless of external validation. The question, then, is not, how can I earn respect? But, am I living a life that respects my own integrity? Picture a young man named Daniel, struggling to fit in with a group of friends who often mock his ambitions. Inspired by this teaching, Daniel chooses to walk away from that circle, despite the loneliness it initially brings. In time, he finds people who value his authenticity. Respect for oneself, as Confucius suggests, is the foundation upon which respect from others is built. The superior man thinks always of virtue, the common man thinks of comfort. This quote may feel counterintuitive in a world that prioritizes convenience and instant gratification. But what if true fulfillment requires discomfort? What if the moments that challenge us the most are the ones that define us? Confucius' words resonate strongly with the Stoic idea of living according to nature, not in the sense of avoiding hardship, but in embracing it as a necessary part of growth. Think of an athlete enduring grueling training sessions or an artist facing repeated rejection. Virtue, in this context, is about aligning our actions with a higher purpose, even when it's difficult. Now, pause and reflect. What sacrifices are you willing to make to live a life of virtue? Are you chasing fleeting comfort at the expense of lasting meaning? When you know a thing, to hold that you know it, and when you do not know a thing, to allow that you do not know it. This is knowledge. This timeless teaching reminds us of the power of honesty, both with ourselves and others. In a culture obsessed with appearing knowledgeable, admitting ignorance is an act of courage. This humility is a cornerstone of Stoicism as well. Seneca wrote that the wise person is never afraid to say, "I don't know." How often do we let our egos trap us in pretense, preventing genuine growth? And what would it look like to let go of that pretense? Confucius also said, "What you do not want done to yourself, do not do to others." This golden rule transcends time, culture, and philosophy. It's not just about avoiding harm, it's about actively cultivating empathy. Imagine a world where every action we take is guided by this principle. What kind of relationships, communities, and lives would we build? Let's bring this wisdom to life. Take Maya, a manager who often finds herself frustrated with her team's mistakes. Inspired by this teaching, she begins asking herself, how would I want to be treated in their position? This shift transforms her leadership style, fostering trust and collaboration within her team. Empathy, as Confucius and the Stoics remind us, isn't just a moral virtue, it's a practical tool for harmony. Finally, let's reflect on one of Confucius' most profound teachings. The journey with 1,000 miles begins with a single step. This isn't just a call to action, it's a reminder to honor the process. How often do we get paralyzed by the enormity of our goals? How often do we forget that every great achievement starts with a humble beginning? This teaching mirrors the Stoic idea of focusing on the present moment. Marcus Aurelius often emphasized the importance of doing the task at hand to the best of one's ability. So, let me ask you, what is the single step you can take today toward your most meaningful goal? As we conclude this journey through Confucius' wisdom and its alignment with Stoic principles, one truth stands out. Fulfillment isn't about reaching a destination. It's about the path we walk, the values we uphold, and the small, consistent steps we take each day. So, I leave you with this question. How will you take what you've learned here and transform it into action? What will you do, starting today, to live a life that is not just successful, but deeply meaningful? Thank you for embarking on this journey with me. Confucius' wisdom isn't just a relic of the past. It's a compass for navigating the challenges of today, guiding us toward a life of harmony, courage, and resilience.